people asking, is that really Simon Cowell?
Something sure looks different about Simon Cowell in a new video.
I always say on this show, 2 or 3 minutes can change your life.
Sometimes, a voice doesn't just fill a room, it cracks it open. Courtney Hadwin's story isn't about a rise and fall. It's about a flame that burned so brightly the world paused to watch, and then kept listening even after the fire dimmed. This is not just the story of a girl who sang. It's the story of what happens.
I'm Courtney Hadwin.
When you were on the show last time and you didn't win, my mouth literally dropped.
When someone sings the truth, lives it with every nerve, and then drifts back into shadows, leaving behind echoes that refuse to fade. Her journey was not polished or prepackaged. It was raw. It was real. And perhaps, more than anything, it was human. In an age obsessed with instant fame and algorithm-driven popularity, Courtney Hadwin offered something radically different, something unpolished, unfiltered, and unrepentantly authentic. She wasn't built for virality. She didn't tailor her voice to trends, and yet, when she opened her mouth to sing, everything else fell away. No glitter, no gimmicks, just soul. Her arrival felt like a rupture in the noise, a reminder of what music can be when it's not trying to be marketable. Simon Cowell, known for his brutally honest critiques and industry-savvy instincts, was one of the first to recognize the rare thing she carried. It wasn't just vocal talent, it was something harder to define, a force, an aura, a ghost of greatness long thought gone. This is the story of what happens when such a rare spirit crosses paths with someone who actually sees it, protects it, and maybe, in the end,
It feels really weird, but I'm really happy.
grieves it. The girl with the shaky voice. Courtney Hadwin walked onto the America's Got Talent stage in 2018 with a presence so delicate, it was easy to underestimate her. Her shoulders were hunched, her voice barely above a whisper, her nervousness visible in every twitch and shift. The audience exchanged skeptical glances. The judges prepared themselves for yet another forgettable audition. But when the first beat of Otis Redding's Hard to Handle dropped, the girl vanished, and a storm arrived. What unfolded in the next 90 seconds stunned the judges and shocked millions. Courtney unleashed a sound so fierce and electric, it was as if Janis Joplin's spirit had erupted inside her. Her voice, full of gravel, soul, and unfiltered intensity, shattered the room. The contrast between her timid entrance and volcanic performance created a collective gasp across the auditorium. Simon Cowell's usual poker face melted into astonishment. He leaned forward, captivated. His eyebrows raised, eyes locked. He didn't interrupt, didn't mutter a snide remark. He watched. For once, the moment spoke louder than any critique. A viral phenomenon. That performance didn't just earn applause, it became internet history. Within hours, it had racked up millions of views. People couldn't stop sharing it, reacting to it, talking about it. The phrase Courtney Hadwin was suddenly everywhere. She was just 13, but she was singing with the weight of someone who had lived through generations. Her voice was ancient in the best sense, like an echo from a bygone era of authenticity. Comments poured in from around the globe. Music icons, influencers, and ordinary fans all agreed. Courtney Hadwin wasn't just a singer, she was a phenomenon. Simon, ever the skeptical kingmaker, told her, "You're not from this era, you're from a whole other world." It wasn't hyperbole, it was recognition. She had done something timeless, and people felt it in their bones. This wasn't just talent, it was possession.
It makes me feel really proud of myself. Yeah.
In the wake of her explosive audition on America's Got Talent, Courtney Hadwin was expected to follow a familiar script. Most contestants who achieve overnight fame go on to become media fixtures. They release singles under major labels, appear on morning shows, participate in press junkets, and build carefully curated brands. But Courtney broke that mold almost immediately. After advancing to the AGT finals and appearing in America's Got Talent: The Champions, she pulled back instead of leaning in. There were no talk show circuits, no promotional blitzes. Her red carpet appearances were non-existent, her interviews sparse. For someone so young, this level of restraint was startling and intriguing. In an era where social media presence is considered essential to success, Courtney kept her online life minimal. Fans would scroll through her Instagram or YouTube hoping for updates, only to be met with long silences. Yet this quiet didn't create distance, it created mystique. Courtney wasn't selling herself. She wasn't positioning herself for maximum visibility. She was staying close to something more authentic. People speculated. Was she shy, overwhelmed, rebellious? Maybe a bit of all three. But those who watched her closely came to see it differently. She wasn't running from fame. She was holding onto her soul. She protected the wellspring of her music, the raw emotion that had stunned the world on that AGT stage. Fame is a flood, and Courtney seemed to know that if she let it could drown her. Instead, she built her own levee. In doing so, she became more than a performer. She became a mystery. Somewhere, behind the blinding lights and roaring applause of talent shows lies a machine, one that churns out stars and discards them just as quickly. But amid that machinery, something rare happened. Simon Cowell, the ever-composed judge known for cutting critiques and icy stares, found himself moved by Courtney. What began as professional interest turned into something more personal. After the show ended, insiders whispered about private meetings. Simon had reportedly invited Courtney and her family to his own home, not for business, not for PR, but to connect. He saw something fragile in her, not in talent. Hers was volcanic, but in spirit. He recognized the danger she was in. The world would want to exploit her fire until there was nothing left but smoke. Perhaps he saw a bit of his younger self in her, or maybe he saw what could happen to someone so young and real in an industry so artificial. Either way, he stepped in, not as a manager hungry for royalties, but as a kind of guardian. When he signed her to Psycho Music, the details were different than usual. Sources claimed the contract was structured with limits, not on her, but on the demands placed upon her. High-pressure promo tours were shelved, commercial tie-ins were declined. Simon reportedly insisted on giving her time, space, and creative autonomy. Their relationship wasn't plastered across magazines. There were no staged photo ops. What they shared was quieter, a rare kind of mentorship. Simon, often seen as the industry's harshest gatekeeper, became its gentlest steward for her. And that connection, though mostly hidden, was real.
After the show, I really want to be able to release my own music and show people my own music.
Music on her terms. When Courtney began releasing music, fans expected fireworks, a debut album, a national tour, radio interviews. But instead, there were whispers. Soft releases on streaming platforms, sparse announcements. The first track, Breakable, arrived not with fanfare but with vulnerability. It wasn't a pop anthem, it was a portrait. Her voice, still packed with that electric grit, carried a new depth. Where her AGT performance had roared, these new songs whispered. Listeners leaned in. In tracks like Breakable, they heard not just power, but precision. She was no longer trying to prove she belonged. She was exploring where she fit, and more importantly, who she really was. The themes were darker, more introspective. The lyrics felt like journal entries, the kind written in the dead of night and never meant to be seen, yet she shared them anyway. Then came Happy Christmas, a delicate, melancholic holiday song that resisted the season's usual cheer. Again, she subverted expectations. Rather than chasing a viral hit, she delivered emotional resonance. And still, she remained nearly silent in the public eye. No interviews, no explanations, just songs. Fans didn't complain. They connected with the honesty. Courtney wasn't performing a persona, she was peeling one away. Each track felt like another layer shed, and while others raced for attention, she stood still, letting the music speak. Her silence became its own statement. She would not be rushed, not be packaged. She would do it her way, or not at all. In every note, you could feel it. She was building something deeply personal, one song at a time. As the months passed, Courtney's already sparse digital footprint grew even quieter. Her last posts sat untouched. Her YouTube uploads halted. Fans waited for new music. Instead, they got silence. At first, they were patient. Artists need space, they told themselves. But then the silence stretched. It wasn't just time, it was distance. Something felt off. Theories began circulating. Some thought she was stepping away to pursue education. Others believed she was trapped in label disputes. A few speculated she was simply taking time to grow. But longtime fans, those who'd followed her since the very beginning, sensed something more haunting. It didn't feel like a break, it felt like a disappearance. She had gone from the most talked-about teen singer in the world to a name whispered on niche message boards. Her absence didn't spark outrage, it sparked concern. People weren't angry she was gone. They were worried about why. What was strange wasn't just the silence itself, but how deliberate it seemed. There was no goodbye post, no taking a break message, no public statement from her team. It was as if the Courtney they knew had slowly backed away until she was just out of view, like a figure walking into a fog. And the fog didn't lift. For a while, it thickened. Questions mounted, the mystery grew, and with it, a kind of ache took root in her fan base. They didn't want her to return for entertainment's sake. They wanted to know she was okay. But there was no answer. Only quiet. Then, out of nowhere, a new song appeared.
What a performance, though, tonight. You really, I feel like you cemented your space in the music.
No announcement, no pre-release buzz, just an upload. The track was raw, stripped down, and haunting. But it wasn't the melody or instrumentation that caught the world's attention. It was a single line that stopped listeners cold. If I told you everything, you'd never hear me the same way again. In that lyric, fans heard something different. Not a teenage lament, not a cryptic metaphor. They heard pain. They heard a confession. They heard a warning. Suddenly, her silence took on new weight. Her earlier songs had hinted at vulnerability, but this was different. This was a message, and maybe even a goodbye. Fans began revisiting her catalog, listening with new ears. In another recent song, the word goodbye was repeated like a mantra, soft but insistent. It wasn't a theatrical farewell. It was subdued, aching. People began to wonder if Courtney had been telling them something all along, if her retreat from the spotlight wasn't an intermission, but a conclusion. Some tried to decode every lyric. Others simply let the music wash over them, feeling the sorrow but respecting the silence. For many, that one line, "You'd never hear me the same way again," became the thread that tied all the mystery together. If she was speaking through her art, then maybe that was the only way she could. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Boom. The vanished footage. It began with a video, grainy, almost ghost-like. Posted late at night on an obscure fan account, the clip didn't seem remarkable at first. It showed Courtney Hadwin on a dimly lit stage at a modest venue, far from the roaring crowds of talent shows and spotlighted fame. Her voice still held that electric force, still trembled with raw emotion. But something was different. Her posture was slighter, her movements gentler, her energy softer. She looked fragile, as though the world had weighed her down. The fire in her performance was there, flickering fiercely, but it was dimmer, like a candle burning at both ends. What struck viewers most wasn't what she sang, but what happened after. There was no encore, no meet and greet. She slipped out quietly through a back door, shadowed by a woman in scrubs, someone more nurse than manager. The image was haunting. It went viral in hours, and then, without explanation, it vanished. Shortly after, an anonymous blog post surfaced, claiming Courtney was battling a serious private health condition. No name, no proof, just a plea for privacy and prayers. That, too, disappeared within days. But something had already shifted. The silence around Courtney's absence grew heavier. The disappearance wasn't just physical, it was digital, emotional, spiritual. And in its wake, concern swelled. Fans began to feel it. Something was wrong. The kind of wrong that doesn't shout, but whispers, slowly, persistently. Something that made the heart ache and the mind race. Something that hinted Courtney Hadwin wasn't just gone. She was retreating, fading. As Courtney's presence faded from the public eye, another figure began to recede, quietly, almost in tandem. Simon Cowell, once the ever-present face of talent television, began to withdraw. At first, it was subtle, a canceled red carpet event here, a missed AGT reunion there. But the pattern became undeniable. Scheduled interviews vanished from networks without explanation. His once consistent media appearances dwindled to silence. At first, many chalked it up to burnout, or age, or disinterest. But to those who watched closely, especially fans who remembered the raw spark between Simon and Courtney on that stage years ago, it felt like something more. His withdrawal was not just professional, it was personal. When a journalist finally caught up with him and asked, "Why now?" Simon paused. His usually sharp expression softened. "Some things," he said slowly.
She never wished to be famous. She wanted to be a singer. And she doesn't conform. She's just a normal person.
"Are more important right now." That was all he offered. He didn't clarify. He didn't need to. To insiders, his shift was jarring. The once fierce judge, who could slice a performance with a sentence, now seemed quieter, as though something sacred had been broken, and he was carrying the pieces with him. Behind the scenes, staff whispered that he had taken long leaves of absence, avoided board meetings, and spent time alone at his countryside estate. His smile became rarer, his words more measured. It wasn't just that Simon had stepped away, it was that he had stepped back into himself, burdened by something unspoken. And in the echo of Courtney's absence, his silence said everything. With Courtney gone from stages and Simon missing from screens, the internet did what it always does. It speculated. Whispers turned to threads, threads turned to theories. Across fan forums, obscure Reddit pages, and video comments, one phrase kept echoing: tragic diagnosis, no source, no confirmation, just a repeated murmur that refused to fade. Some believed Courtney had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, explaining her sudden retreat and the haunting look in that vanished video. Others suggested a mental health crisis, citing the emotional weight of fame carried from such a young age. There were even those who wove elaborate conspiracies, industry pressure, silent stories, hidden truths. But beneath the wild guesses was something deeper. Grief masked as curiosity. People weren't chasing drama. They were trying to understand heartbreak. Simon's uncharacteristic silence only added weight. For a man known to speak with clarity, even brutality, his refusal to address Courtney's absence spoke volumes. At charity events, when her name was cautiously mentioned, he would lower his eyes. Sometimes he'd nod. Sometimes he'd walk away. It wasn't what he said. It was how he didn't say it. For those who truly cared, it wasn't about needing answers anymore. It was about feeling that something important had been lost, and fearing that it might never return. What made the rumors believable wasn't the content. It was the atmosphere, the hush, the changed expressions, the ache left behind in two people who once lit up a stage and now lived in shadows. A global wave of grace. What followed was something the internet rarely delivers: grace. There was no outrage campaign, no obsessive hunt for details, no tabloid-style frenzy. Instead, something beautiful happened. A quiet, collective tenderness spread across the digital world. Fans, strangers, even former critics found their way to Courtney's old videos, her social media posts, her lyrics. And instead of demanding answers, they left words of love. Stay strong. You gave me hope when I had none. You're not forgotten. You're loved. I hope you're okay, wherever you are. Comments filled every corner of her online presence like candlelight in a dark chapel. It didn't matter whether she read them. It mattered that they were sent. A soft global vigil formed, unorganized, unprompted. People replayed her audition from AGT, not just for nostalgia, but like they were listening to the voice of someone who had once reminded them that rawness was strength. Her growls, her trembles, her fire, they meant something more now. They were prayers in reverse, offerings sent back to her, in gratitude and in hope. No one demanded an update. No one pried. There was, remarkably, a shared respect for the silence. A near sacred understanding that some absences are not gaps to be filled, but spaces to be honored. For once, the internet was not a spotlight. It was a lighthouse, steady, silent, shining outward, just in case she was still out there, watching, listening. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was compassion, the kind that doesn't need to speak to be heard. Hence, Simon Cowell never issued a statement. No press release, no tweet, no exclusive interview. But the goodbye still came, quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a whisper wrapped in silence. At an industry gala months later, Simon was asked a simple question. What's the most unforgettable AGT audition of your career? He paused. His signature smirk didn't surface. He didn't rush the answer or deflect it with humor. Instead, he looked down for a long moment, the room around him waiting, holding its breath. Then came a soft reply. Some people never leave you. Not really. He didn't say her name, but he didn't have to. The air changed. Those who were watching closely felt it, like a final note trailing off at the end of a haunting song. It was grief, disguised as memory. Love, unspoken but unmissable. Simon moved on after that, returned to projects, made appearances, smiled for cameras again. But it was clear the light inside him had shifted, not gone, just softened. There were no tributes, no retrospectives, no public mourning, only the kind of absence that leaves an outline. Fans understood. So did the industry. It was as if the story had turned from a chapter into a memory, and all that remained was what lived in between the lines. In the silence of that moment, a farewell had been delivered. Not with words, not with headlines, but with a glance downward and a voice cracked just enough to carry the weight of someone unforgettable. Though Courtney Hadwin no longer graced stages or spoke in interviews, her voice had not disappeared. It lived on, in echoes, not the loud kind, but the kind that linger in late-night playlists, in grainy YouTube clips played on repeat, in the quiet moments when someone needs to feel less alone. Her audition is still one of the most watched, her performances revisited like sacred texts, but now...
Welcome to America's Got Talent. How are you?
A little bit nervous.
That's okay to be nervous. That's totally understandable. What's your name?
Courtney.
And how old are you?
13.
13. What's your favourite subject in school?
Music.
Fans don't just listen for the music. They listen for her, for signs of what she might have been carrying all along. Each growl is examined like a journal entry. Each note feels more like a sigh than a scream. What once felt wild and uncontainable now feels intimate, like a secret shared. Her art, stripped of its setting, remains achingly human. It's no longer about fame. It's about connection. People say they can't explain it, but they feel it. That shift from performance to presence. From noise to meaning. It's not nostalgia that drives the replay buttons, it's reverence. Courtney didn't just perform songs, she became them. And in doing so, she unlocked something in others. Courage, vulnerability, truth. She's not just remembered, she's felt. In dorm rooms, hospital beds, car rides, and quiet walks. In places where people need strength but can't find words. Her voice remains, not because it was loud, but because it was real. And in a world that often forgets, Courtney's silence somehow made everyone remember what it means to feel. Simon's grief. Those closest to Simon Cowell began to notice it first. It wasn't something obvious. He still wore the tailored suits, still appeared on camera, still offered his signature critiques. But there was a softness now, almost imperceptible, like an old photograph beginning to fade at the edges. He no longer rushed through conversations. His laughter came slower. His gaze lingered longer. There was a weight to him, not physical, but emotional, like someone who had carried something fragile for too long and finally set it down. Friends whispered of long weekends spent alone at his estate. Colleagues noted how often he left meetings early, how rarely he stayed for after-parties. He still worked, but his passion had shifted. Fame didn't dazzle him the way it used to. Talent didn't thrill him the same way. Something had dulled the edge of his ambition. Many suspected it was Courtney. He had believed in her, not just as a performer, but as a phenomenon, a soul wrapped in sound. And when she vanished, it felt like something he had invested a piece of himself in had been lost. Not to competition or failure, but to something he couldn't fix. That powerlessness haunted him. For a man built on defining others' potential, her disappearance left a hollow space he couldn't measure or control. Simon Cowell, the man who once ruled stages, now seemed to walk among memories, and though he rarely spoke of her, everyone around him knew. He was grieving, not just a voice, but a light that changed him. The legacy that remains. Courtney Hadwin may one day return, step back onto a stage, surprise the world, remind us all why we first fell in love with that thunderous, trembling voice. Or she may never reappear. And if she doesn't, it won't matter, because she already gave us everything. In just a few years, she carved her place, not in charts or awards, but in the hearts of those who truly listened. She didn't fit into categories, too raw for pop, too wild for polished radio, too real for an industry that often rewards repetition. And that's what made her unforgettable. She wasn't a product, she was a force, and that force didn't disappear. It transformed. Her story became a parable of vulnerability and power, a reminder that some lights burn so brightly they leave trails even when they're gone, that sometimes the loudest echoes come from the quietest absences. People still hum her songs under their breath, still show their children her audition, still find strength in her courage to stand trembling on a stage, heart exposed, and deliver truth through music. Her silence didn't erase her. It made her eternal. Simon never said it aloud, but his grief was her monument. The fans who still leave comments, light candles, and share stories, they are her legacy. She became more than a girl who could sing. She became a symbol of something rare and sacred. The moment when art is pure, pain is real, and a single voice makes the world stop. And in that stillness, she still sings. There are voices we remember, and then there are voices we carry. Courtney Hadwin's voice wasn't just heard, it was felt. Even in silence, she sings. And in every moment she gave us, we found something rare, the kind of truth that doesn't fade, even when the spotlight does. Her silence is not absence, it is resonance. And Simon Cowell, the man who helped discover her, knew perhaps better than anyone. Some talents aren't meant to burn forever in the open. Some are too bright, too wild, too honest. Courtney was lightning in a bottle. And no matter what the future holds, her voice will always live on. In our playlists, in our hearts, and in the quiet moments when we need to remember what it means to truly feel. We may never know exactly why the music stopped, but we will always remember how it sounded when it played. The world didn't just witness Courtney Hadwin, it felt her. And in that feeling, she remains. Not every silence is an ending. Sometimes it's just the breath before a return, or the final note of a song that never truly leaves.